Good morning, Europe. You are watching Europe Today. Around the time that the FBI was examining the equipment recovered from the Chinese spy balloon shot down off the South Carolina coast, American intelligence agencies detected what they feared was a more worrisome intruder, mysterious computer code appearing in telecommunications systems in Guam and elsewhere in the United States. Melvin Kwek figured out something was wrong when U.S. federal agents began to visit him in 2022. "Could you take a look at your network?" they asked Kwek, who'd been running cybersecurity at the Guam Power Authority, an autonomous agency of the island's government for the previous 6 years. And then, more furtively, "Could we take a look at your network?" one of the federal agents said. Looking at a network, in this case, meant analyzing the vast amount of data traffic flowing through its routers and switches, often for months at a time, in search of tiny anomalies that might indicate foul play. Kwek had little idea why the agents were so worried, and he was pretty sure that his 4-person staff wasn't up to the task. "I didn't expect to be dealing with national security threats," he says, recounting the interactions while visiting a cluster of the GPA's substations, where some rickety wire fencing serves as the only true protection. GPA is the only power utility on Guam, a dreamy tropical idyll that the U.S. first took control of in 1898. The island, now a U.S. territory, is the nation's westernmost point, more than twice as close to mainland China as it is to the continental U.S. Guam's economy centers on the roughly 600,000 tourists who visit each year, drawn by its white sand beaches, Cartier and Rolex stores, and the opportunity to wake up, as the island's slogan goes, where America's day begins. Most of the tourists are South Korean or Japanese, but there are American visitors too, most notably the military personnel who show up to work on the U.S. military bases that take up about a third of Guam's landmass. Hotel guests are liable to notice service members in camouflage standing in line for coffee, alongside the half-dressed holiday makers still dripping from the water slides. The U.S. Navy is GPA's biggest customer, consuming about 20% of the power it generated in 2023. The visits that Kwek began receiving in 2022 were part of the U.S.'s response to troubling signs that Chinese hackers had infiltrated much of the island's civilian infrastructure. The military relies on those same systems to operate its bases, and the U.S. intelligence community says the hacking campaign was probably intended to maintain the ability to wreak havoc on a spot of vital military importance. Still, the military will continue to use civilian infrastructure even as it undergoes a multi-billion-dollar expansion on the island, in part because of the potential political implications of building parallel systems that wouldn't benefit the local population. The worst-case scenarios for a U.S.-China conflict, as military and policy experts describe it, usually involve China invading Taiwan and seeking to disable growing U.S. military capability in Guam to impede a response. This could mean a missile attack. Some Chinese ballistic missiles have been nicknamed Guam killers for their ability to reach the island. But the top U.S. military leader on Guam says cyber attacks are more likely. U.S. officials have recounted in testimony and briefings how Chinese hackers are building the capacity to poison water supplies nationwide, flood homes with sewage, and cut off phones, power, ports, and airports, actions that could cause mass casualties, disrupt military operations, and potentially plunge the U.S. into societal panic. The aim, U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Director Jen Easterly told Congress in January 2024, would be to take down everything, everywhere, all at once. China has publicly denied its involvement in the campaign that U.S. officials have described or in other strategic hacking campaigns. In an emailed statement, Lu Pingyu, a spokesperson at the Chinese embassy in Washington, called such accusations smear attacks against China without any factual basis, adding that Beijing consistently opposes and combats all forms of cyber attacks. The challenge now falls to the incoming administration. In its 2024 platform, the Republican Party promised to raise security standards for networks and defend crucial infrastructure from cyber attacks, goals it will have to square with its traditional aversion to regulation. Although Donald Trump has wavered about committing to defending Taiwan militarily, he's taken a confrontational approach to China. Continued tensions could add incentive for an aggressive cyber approach from both sides. The hacking campaign involving Guam is now widely known as Volt Typhoon, and National Security Agency officials have said that defanging it has become a top priority. Across the country, The US has already discovered more than 100 intrusions related to the campaign, according to someone who's been briefed on the investigations and asked to remain anonymous because of the sensitive nature of the subject. But nowhere have the alarms flashed brighter than in Guam. US officials are increasingly alarmed that their first line of cyber defense falls on institutions such as GPA and under-resourced private companies, all of which can seem unable or at times even unwilling to confront the threat. The US has long accused Chinese operatives of cyber espionage, saying they've stolen everything from economic data to military secrets and the personal data of almost all US citizens. In late December, the U.S. Department of the Treasury said it had been the victim of a major cybersecurity incident that it blamed on a Chinese state-sponsored hacker. Salt Typhoon, another recently exposed campaign blamed on China, has been going on for years and is believed to have targeted the phones of both Trump and the campaign team of Vice President Kamala Harris, among others during the 2024 presidential campaign, compromising 9 U.S. telecommunications carriers and sweeping through dozens of countries around the world. Because it focuses primarily on data, Salt Typhoon targets IT systems. Volt Typhoon, by contrast, focuses on operational technology, systems that are used to manage physical services. Its targets include internet networks associated with ports, rail lines, gas pipelines, water systems, and satellites, with an eye toward gaining control of and disrupting their operations, according to claims from the U.S. and its allies. Using cyber attacks to disable non-military critical infrastructure would amount to a deliberate assault on the general population, says Paul Nakasone, a retired 4-star general who led the NSA until February. Cyber espionage is often uncovered when attackers begin moving large amounts of data off a network. Volt Typhoon, however, infiltrates its targets and then operates as an authentic user, doing little more than lurking around, a technique known as living off the land. The goal, experts say, is to gain the level of access needed to cause massive harm and yet be quiet enough to avoid detection. As long as the attackers do this, it can be hard even to know they've made it inside. In many cases, the only way to discover Volt Typhoon's presence is to find some anomaly in a mountain of regular usage data, a single logon among millions from an odd time or an unusual location. Microsoft Corporation researchers found the first signs of Volt Typhoon in 2021 while investigating a cyber attack against a port in Houston. In January 2022, they noticed similar activity at a telecommunications company in Guam. Instead of going after computers or smartphones, the hackers commandeered devices such as purse-size hardware firewalls that small businesses favor to protect their networks. The hackers were diligent about covering their tracks. They deleted network traffic logs, security programs, and even some malware from previous attackers that might have drawn scrutiny if found, researchers say. To obscure itself, the team behind Volt Typhoon used a type of malware in Guam that it hadn't deployed in other attacks, which Microsoft's researchers took as a sign that the island was a high priority. In one case, the researchers spotted that the hackers had left a string of text inside the encryption. By the end of 2022, the Defense Department had confirmed that a handful of U.S. federal networks on the island had also been infiltrated, including sensitive defense networks meant to be impregnable, according to a former U.S. defense official briefed on the findings, who asked for anonymity to discuss non-public information. The official's immediate reaction, holy cow. Before they can even begin figuring out how to remove hackers, victims of Volt Typhoon need to implement basic cyber hygiene, conduct extensive network checks, and get lucky enough to find the subtle signs of intrusion. It's more or less impossible to know whether the hackers have been completely removed, says Jonathan Shargwaloff, a former GPA network system administrator who now works for the U.S. Coast Guard in Guam. The government-wide efforts, which already involve U.S. Cyber Command, Coast Guard, CISA, the FBI, and the NSA, could take years. U.S. Cyber Command is having more luck at Guam telecommunications company GTA Teleguam, according to a person familiar with the matter, who says the agency is offering support aimed at boosting defensive measures. Such arrangements aren't straightforward, Benjamin Wu, a partner in Huntsman Family Investments LLC in Utah, which acquired GTA in 2017, says it's hard to balance very amicable relations with the U.S. military against customers who don't want to hear that the government might have access to their information. But Wu says small companies in Guam simply don't have the resources to go up against China's finest hackers. I don't want to sound like a doomsayer, he says, but it's almost just too easy. Thanks for watching Europe Today.